Two men graduate from the same state university in the same May with the same degree and almost the same student loan balance, and one of them takes the first job he's offered while the other one turns his down. 5 years later, the gap between what they earn is bigger than most people's entire salary, and the reason has almost nothing to do with talent. Derek and Marcus met in a business statistics class sophomore year and stayed friends through graduation. Same public university, same marketing degree, same graduation ceremony in May of 2026. Both 23 years old. Derek finished with about $21,000 in federal student loans, Marcus with roughly $19,000. Neither one had a job lined up on graduation day, which put them in very ordinary company, because the class of 2026 walked into the worst entry-level hiring market in decades. Unemployment for recent college graduates aged 22 to 27 had climbed to 5.7%, well above the 4.2% rate for all workers. That reversal matters more than the number itself. For most of the last 30 years, having a degree meant your unemployment rate was lower than everyone else's. Somewhere around 2021 that flipped, and it has stayed flipped ever since. The deeper problem wasn't unemployment. It was what kind of work was actually available. Entry-level job postings across the United States were down 35% from where they'd been in early 2023. Not down 35% in one industry, down 35% overall. The rungs at the bottom of the ladder were quietly disappearing, and both men spent the summer sending applications into what felt like a void. There's a second number that explains why that summer felt so much worse than it looked on paper. The average starting salary employers reported for the class of 2026 was about $68,800, up 5.5% from the year before. That figure is real, and it's also badly misleading because it's an average pulled upward by computer science graduates at $81,500 and engineering graduates at $81,200. The median new graduate lands closer to $60,000, and surveys that same spring found new graduates were overestimating their own starting salaries by nearly $24,000. So Derek and Marcus spent 4 years being told their degree was worth something in the high 60s, and then got offers in the 30s. That gap between the number in your head and the number on the offer letter is exactly the pressure that makes people sign fast. In August, Derek got an offer, operations coordinator at a regional logistics company, $38,000 a year, no degree required in the posting. He'd applied to over 90 positions by that point. He took it in under 24 hours. 2 weeks later, Marcus got an almost identical offer, $36,000, customer support at an insurance brokerage, also a role that didn't require his degree. He turned it down. Everyone told Marcus he was making a mistake. His mother told him. Derek told him gently over beers. The common sense argument was overwhelming and, honestly, mostly correct. You take the job, you get income, you get experience, you get out of your parents' house, and you look for something better from a position of employment rather than desperation. Nobody hires the guy with a gap on his resume. Marcus didn't have a great counter-argument at the time. What he had was a number he'd looked up and couldn't stop thinking about. Here's that number. 43% of college graduates are underemployed in their first job, meaning they're working in a role that doesn't require a degree at all. That's already uncomfortable. But the part that changes the decision is what happens next. Research from Burning Glass and the Strata Institute tracked graduates over a full decade and found that people whose first job was underemployed were 3.5 times more likely to still be underemployed 10 years after graduation compared to people who started in a college-level role. 10 years later, 45% of them were still there. The first job wasn't a stepping stone. For most people, it was the step they stayed on. It's worth understanding the mechanism, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Nobody sits in a room deciding to trap you. What happens is that recruiters and applicant tracking systems both screen primarily on your most recent job title, not on your degree. 2 years into an operations coordinator role, the algorithm reading your resume sees an operations coordinator, and the human reading it sees someone who has been doing that for 2 years and will presumably keep doing it. Your degree moves further down the page every year. The longer you stay, the more your title defines you, and the less your education does. That's why the effect compounds instead of fading. And it's also why the window to correct it is widest in the first 2 years and narrows sharply after that. The same research found the pattern hits some groups harder than others. 47% of women graduates start out underemployed, And that gap persists over the decade rather than closing. The money follows the same shape. Underemployed graduates earn roughly $10,000 a year, less than graduates working in college-level jobs, and that gap doesn't close on its own. Look at it as a premium over a high school diploma, and it gets starker. A graduate working in a college-level job earns an 88% premium over someone with only a high school education. A graduate who's underemployed earns a 25% premium. Same degree, same debt, same 4 years, a third of the value because of what happened in one hiring season. So Marcus made a different bet. He moved back into his parents' house, which he was not happy about, and took a part-time job at a hardware store, 20 hours a week at $18 an hour, roughly $1,560 a month before taxes. Then he spent every remaining hour of his week doing one specific thing, preparing for the CompTIA Security Plus certification and building an actual home lab he could talk about in an interview. He picked that target for a reason, and the reason is the most useful part of this entire story. He didn't pick it because a YouTube video told him cybersecurity was hot. He opened a job board, filtered to his metro area, searched the exact certification name, and counted the results. There were over 200 open postings within 30 miles that named it directly. That's it. That was the whole research method, and it's the one most people skip. The cost was real, but small. The Security Plus exam voucher runs about $425. Study materials, practice exams, and a couple of cheap used computers for the lab brought his total to roughly $700. Compare that to a coding bootcamp at $15,000 or a master's degree at $40,000. And the asymmetry is the entire point. He was risking $700 and about 7 months of reduced income. Now watch the first year, because this is where Derek looks like he obviously made the right call. Derek starts in September at $38,000. After federal and state taxes and his retirement contribution, he's bringing home somewhere around $2,400 a month. He moves into a shared apartment, pays about $900 for his half, buys a used car, and starts making his student loan payments on time. He is, by every visible measure, a functioning adult. He posts about it. His parents are relieved. Marcus is living in his childhood bedroom, earning about $1,100 a month after taxes from a hardware store, and spending his evenings on practice exams. He is not posting about it. When people ask what he's up to, the honest answer sounds bad out loud. He fails the Security Plus practice exam 3 times before he passes the real one in February. In March, 7 months after graduation, Marcus gets hired as a Tier 1 security operations analyst at $62,000 a year. Even then, Derek is still ahead. Add up the first 12 months after graduation, and Derek has earned about $38,000. Marcus has earned roughly $12,000 from the hardware store, plus 5 months of his new salary. Call it $26,000 for about $38,000 as well, minus the $700 he spent on the certification and a few $1,000s of savings he burned through. At the 1-year mark, they're within a few $1,000s of each other, and Derek has a full year of continuous employment on his resume, while Marcus has a 7-month gap he'll have to explain for years. If the story ended here, Derek made the better decision. It doesn't end here, and the reason is that the two men are now on different curves, not different points. Here's the framework worth stealing, and it works for any version of this decision, whether you're weighing a certification, a trade apprenticeship, a nursing prerequisite, or a move to a different city. Take the salary you're actually targeting, subtract the offer in front of you, and divide by 12. That's your monthly gain if the bet works. Then take everything the retraining will cost, tuition plus exam fees plus the income you'll give up while you're doing it, and divide that total by the monthly gain. That number is your break-even in months. For Marcus, it was straightforward. $62,000 minus $36,000 is $26,000 a year, or about $2,100 a month. His total cost, $700 in materials plus roughly $14,000 in foregone income over 7 months, came to about $15,000. $15,000 divided by $2,100 is a little over 7 months. He'd be even by the following autumn, and ahead of Derek permanently after that. If your break-even lands under 18 months, the math is on your side, assuming you can survive the gap. If it's over 30 months, be very careful, because a lot can change in your life in 30 months. And here's the threshold that matters more than any of it. Before you spend $1, count the actual job postings in your actual city that name the exact credential you're about to buy. Not nationwide, not remote, your metro. If that number is under 30, pick a different target. Every predatory training program in America sells a national statistic to a person who has to get hired locally. By the end of year 2, the curves have crossed, and they don't cross back. Derek gets a standard 3% raise to $39,140. Marcus, with a year of documented incident response work, moves to a mid-sized company at $68,000. The gap is now $29,000 a year, which is nearly Derek's entire salary. Year 3 is when Derek does something genuinely smart, and this is the part that keeps this from being a story about one guy being clever and one guy being dumb. He starts looking hard for an exit. He applies to 40 analyst roles that would use his marketing degree and gets 2 interviews. He learns that his 2 years of logistics coordination reads, to a hiring manager, as 2 years of not doing marketing. He eventually job hops sideways into an account coordinator role at $45,000, a genuine improvement and a genuine win, and one that most underemployed graduates never manage at all. He also discovers something he should have found in month 1. His employer offered tuition assistance the whole time. Under federal rules, employers can provide up to $5,250 a year in educational assistance, completely tax-free to the employee. Derek had left roughly $10,000 of free training on the table across 2 years, simply because nobody told him it existed, and he never asked. If you take nothing else from this video, and you're currently in a job you want to leave, go read your own benefits documentation this week. That money is sitting there for a very large number of people who have no idea. Marcus, in year 3, crosses $85,000 after moving into a cloud security role. He also, for the first time, has real leverage, because the same shortage that made those 200 postings exist is still there. At the midpoint, it's worth being honest about what Derek actually gained, because it wasn't nothing. He had 3 uninterrupted years of income, while Marcus had a 7-month hole. He never had to explain a gap. He learned how a real business operates from the inside, how to manage a difficult client, how to survive a reorganization. He was financially independent at 23, while Marcus was asking his mother what was for dinner. He started his retirement contributions 7 months earlier, and in a market where a workplace plan and a decent index fund were compounding steadily, those 7 months are real dollars. And critically, his outcome was certain. Marcus's wasn't. That last point deserves more weight than it usually gets. Marcus's plan had a genuine failure mode. If he hadn't passed the exam in February, or if those 200 postings had dried up, he'd have been sitting at month 10 with no income, no certification, and a resume gap that gets meaningfully harder to explain past the 9-month mark. He'd have ended up taking a job like Derek's anyway, except a year later, and several $1,000s poorer. He didn't win because waiting is smart. He won because he had a specific, verified, locally hireable target and a short, cheap path to it. By year 5, the structural effect has fully played out. Derek, after his sideways move and 2 solid raises, is earning about $52,000. Marcus, now a senior security analyst, is at roughly $98,000. Add up everything each man has earned since graduation, and Derek is at around $221,000 in cumulative gross income. Marcus is at about $356,000. That's a gap of roughly $135,000 over 5 years, from a decision that came down to a 7-month window and a $700 certification. And the forward-looking gap is worse than the backward-looking one, because Derek's raises compound off $52,000 and Marcus's compound off $98,000. A 3% raise is $1,560 for one of them and $2,940 for the other. The same percentage, twice the money, every single year, forever. Now the fair caveat, because this is not an argument that everyone should turn down a job offer. Marcus needed a parent with a spare room and a relationship that could survive 7 more months of proximity. Not everyone has that, and without it, his plan is simply impossible. He also had no dependents, no medical costs, and no one relying on his income. Change any one of those, and taking the $38,000 is not just reasonable, it's correct. Beyond that, the specific advice to get a certification has burned an enormous number of people. The certification is not what got Marcus hired. The certification got him past the filter. What got him hired was that he could describe in detail what he'd actually built and broken in a lab at his parents' kitchen table. A credential with nothing behind it is a receipt, not a qualification. And it's worth saying plainly that entry-level cybersecurity is itself crowded now, which means the exact path Marcus took is harder in 2026 than it was when he took it, and you should run the posting count yourself rather than trusting his answer. So the lesson isn't wait for the right job. Waiting with no plan is just unemployment with better branding. The lesson is that the first job out of school is not a neutral placeholder. It is a category assignment, and the data says the category tends to stick. Underemployment is 3.5 times stickier than most 23-year-olds believe it is. Here's what to actually do this week. If you're standing where these two were, open a job board, filter to the metro area you can realistically live in, and search the exact job title you want to hold in 3 years. Count the postings, then search the specific credential or skill those postings keep naming, and count those. Write both numbers down on paper. If the second number is healthy, calculate your break-even in months using the formula from earlier, and be honest about whether you can survive that many months. If you're already employed somewhere you don't want to be, go find out today whether your company offers tuition assistance, because up to $5,250 a year of it is tax-free, and an enormous number of people never claim a cent. The real question isn't whether you can afford to wait, it's whether you've actually counted the postings, or whether you're about to make a 5-year decision based on a feeling. So, what does that number look like in your city?